Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Yesterday it was Joe Biden, today it was Vladimir Putin's turn. He made a new speech and made some old complaints. Putin blamed the West for the invasion. He declared the Russian army is fighting neo-Nazis and that Russia will prevail. What's different this time is how he spoke. Yes, Putin was conveying the same message, but he was more aggressive and his thoughts perhaps more radical. What does this mean for the trajectory of the conflict? How far is Vladimir Putin prepared to go? He talked about nukes again. Will he get help from his allies like China? And where does all of this leave Ukraine? We'll discuss all of this. Also talk of South Africa wading into this conflict. They're holding military drills with Russia and China. Of course, the Americans are not thrilled about this. Also a headline from India. India's UPI is going global. We'll tell you how India's Unified Payment Interface, or UPI, is gearing up to take on the best in the business, and what does it mean for India's digitization of financial transactions. It's a story you don't want to miss. First, the headlines. Is Russia planning to take over Belarus by 2030? That's what a document allegedly leaked from Russia's presidential administration says. It also talks about formation of a quote-unquote common union state under Russian leadership. Amid heightened tensions with China, Taiwan will boost its military exchanges with the US. President Tsai Ing-wen made the announcement after meeting with visiting US lawmakers. Israel's parliament gives initial approval to the controversial judicial reform bill. This is despite massive protests. Prime Minister Netanyahu has accused protesters of quote-unquote trampling democracy. The bill restricts the power of the judiciary and gives more power to the Prime Minister. Big tech braces for the big fight. The US Supreme Court will examine a law which protects companies from lawsuits over content posted on their platforms. The case stems from a complaint against Google filed by the relatives of one of the victims of the 2015 Paris terror attacks. And a landmark ruling in South Korea, a court has recognized the rights of a same-sex couple for the first time. The order is being seen as a major victory for the LGBTQ community in the country. In 3 days from now, the war in Ukraine will complete 1 year. But before the war's anniversary, another contest has begun, and this one is about dictating the narrative. It is about telling the world who is winning. Yesterday, Joe Biden visited Kyiv to make a point. The US president said Putin's war plans are quote-unquote plain wrong. Today, it was Putin's turn to respond. The Russian president spoke for a full 105 minutes. As expected, he came down hard on the US and its allies. He blamed the West for this war. He said Ukraine is serving the interests of quote-unquote Western masters. He raised the specter of a nuclear conflict yet again. Putin declared that the sanctions against Moscow have failed and that Russia remains as strong as ever. Ultimately, he vowed to press on with the war.
Step by step, we will carefully and systematically solve the problems before us. The responsibility for fueling the Ukraine conflict, for its escalation, for the number of victims lies completely with Western elites and, of course, with the current Kyiv regime. As I said, the West has turned against Russia not only a military and information force, but also an economic one. But it has not achieved its goals anywhere, and it will not. Moreover, those who initiated the sanctions against Russia have punished themselves. I have to announce that Russia is suspending its participation in the New START treaty. Those who embark on the path of direct betrayal, who carry out terrorist attacks and other sorts of crimes directed against the security of our society, must be held accountable under the law.
Putin's speech was an attempt to project strength. The Russian president is sending a message that despite the onslaught of sanctions, the Russian economy is resilient. And the numbers have a story to tell. In the last 1 year, the Russian economy has contracted by 2.1%. Contraction. But do you know what the projection was? A contraction of 12%. So Russia has fared far better than was expected. How did that happen? Broadly, two factors worked to Moscow's advantage. Number one, high oil prices. It brought more money to Russian coffers. And number two, military spending. It supported the Russian economy. And what does this tell you? That the sanctions have indeed not delivered, at least not the way they were envisioned to. Moscow has successfully insulated itself, at least in the short term. And this is Putin's first win. His second win relates to Europe. The invasion did bring the West together. They were more than willing to share arms. But at the same time, Putin has also exposed the deep divisions within Europe. The bloc remains divided over how to deal with Russia. Should they speak to Putin? Or should they shun him? Europe cannot decide. On one side of this divide is French President Macron. He thinks Europe should engage with Russia. Over the weekend, the French president spoke. He spoke about this, and this is what he said. He wants the Kremlin to lose, but he wants the war to end on the negotiation table and not the battleground. In fact, we have a machine translation of what Macron said, that the comment, we have a translation of that, and I'm quoting, "I want Russia to be defeated in Ukraine, and I want Ukraine to be able to defend its position, but I'm convinced that in the end, it will not be concluded militarily. I don't think, like some, that Russia should be totally defeated, attacked on its soil." This is what Macron said. Zelensky, of course, was not thrilled to hear that. He issued a public rebuke to the French president. Zelensky said Macron is wasting his time with Putin, and the idea of a dialogue is quote-unquote useless. Safe to say, if peace talks are proposed, Ukraine will be hard to get on board. And that's just one of Europe's problems. The second one is China. China may enter the war. We told you about this yesterday. The US says China could arm Russia, and the US has warned China against doing this. Now, Brussels too has expressed concern. The EU's Foreign Affairs Chief, Josep Borrell, spoke out. He says supplying arms to Russia is a red line, and China should not cross it. The US ambassador to the United Nations said the same. He said China should not cross the red line. And what is China's response? Well, Beijing has rubbished these demands by the West. It says the US, which itself is pumping arms into the war, is not qualified to speak on the matter.
It is the US who kept providing weapons to the battlefield, not China. The US is in no position to tell us what to do, and we would never accept its finger-pointing and even coercion and pressure on China-Russia relations. The principle that China follows on the Ukraine issue can be simply put as promoting peace talks. Who is calling for dialogue and striving for peace, and who is fanning flames and stoking confrontations, the international community sees clearly.
Good response, but it doesn't answer the big question. Will China send arms to Russia? If it does, it could change the course of the war. This is being called a potential world war again, a war that no side seems to be winning. The West says Putin is fighting a losing battle. Well, they do have a limited point. 1 year of fighting, and Russia controls just 18% of Ukraine's territory, 18%. So the tangible gains for Russia have been limited. What about the intangibles? On this front, Putin has come out on top. Russia is still dictating the pace of the offensive. Ukraine and the West have shown little appetite to counterattack. And this is the cycle they follow. Step 1, Russia launches an attack. Step 2, Ukraine responds. Step 3, the West fires sanctions. Step 4, repeat 1, 2, and 3. This is how the war is going, except for the occasional operation by Ukraine. Will China's entry change this? Again, a lot will depend on how much Putin is prepared to escalate. But how long can Putin continue fighting? If you believe the Western press, he's quite unwell and may not be able to sustain this for long. It may sound like old news because these reports keep coming up every few months. Let me show you what triggered the latest round. Look at this video.
Штурмовик, да, рабочая лошадка. Готовы даже в Беларуси производить при соответствующей небольшой поддержке Российской Федерации технологически.
That's Vladimir Putin with the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. The foot tapping has triggered wild speculation. Is this a medical condition or Morse code? Is Putin unwell or is he sending a secret message? We don't want to hazard a guess, but we do want to dwell on what this is about. The narrative war. Narratives can be more lethal and effective than missiles. Ukraine's president has proven it. Early in the war, he figured out how much optics mattered. He junked the suits for the olive green attire. He lobbied hard for support. His democratic credentials have been questioned in the past. His government's corruption is well documented. But Zelensky told the world that he's fighting the good fight and he got them to donate money and arms. Billions of it. That is the power of narrative. Joe Biden wants to play this game too. So he took a train to Ukraine in the middle of the war. The visit was unprecedented, even though Biden is not the first American president to visit a war zone. He's the oldest. Also the first to visit a battleground with no American troops. And that comes with its own risks. The visit was as much to show support for Ukraine as to show the world how tough a leader Biden is. He was pushing the tough guy narrative.
But Russia's aim was to wipe Ukraine off the map. Putin's war of conquest is failing. Russia's military has lost half its territory it once occupied. Young, talented Russians are fleeing by the tens of thousands, not wanting to come back to Russia. Not just fleeing from the military, fleeing from Russia itself, because they see no future in their country. Russia's economy is now a backwater, isolated and struggling.
Sirens blared across central Kyiv as Biden and Zelensky walked together. Sirens blared, but no attacks took place, no bombs, no firing. The US and Ukraine both knew that Russia will not attack Kyiv while Biden was there. How did they know this? Because just before Biden left for Ukraine, the US informed Russia about the visit. This, we are told, was for deconfliction purposes. So they knew there won't be a strike, but the sirens blared anyway. That is optics. The sirens added to the aesthetics of Biden's visit to a war zone. They symbolize that he traveled to Kyiv despite serious security concerns. Biden suddenly became the strong leader. The 80-year-old man accused of being too old for office. Here he was in Kyiv, challenging Vladimir Putin. He made some announcements. More aid, more weapons, but no fighter jets. That's what he came to say. And that was Biden's story. How does it compare to Putin? A strong man who likes to be seen as a strong man. A no-nonsense leader, supposedly fighting to restore the glory of Russia. Putin has many fans around the world, but his military campaign has not panned out as expected. He was supposed to be able to take Kyiv in a matter of days. This has become a slow, grinding war. Biden's appearance in Kyiv did not help. Russian hardliners are not happy. Telegram channels in Russia are flowing with snarky messages. One of them said, Biden in Kyiv demonstrates the humiliation of Russia. Another said, Biden has visited the Russian city of Kyiv, while Putin has not. So the war is proving a tough one for the Russian president. Listen to what he said earlier this month.
Those who draw European countries, including Germany, into a new war with Russia and even irresponsibly declare this as a done deal, those who are betting that they will defeat Russia on the battlefield clearly don't understand that modern war with Russia will be quite different for them. We don't send our tanks to their borders, but we have the means to respond, and it won't end with the use of armored vehicles.
Putin loses no chance to take on the West. But will this war define his legacy? He's been in power for 23 years. He's shaped the Russia of the century. He aced the narrative game. He was the cool, tough president, a president who ice skates, a president who goes on adventures with his shirt off. The war is testing him in every way, and Biden's visit to Kyiv may have hit him where it hurts the most. Meanwhile, in Turkiye, the mayhem continues, one deadly earthquake after another. Here is the latest. 2 quakes rocked the Hatay province. This is in southern Turkey, near the border with Syria. It happened on Monday evening. The quakes measured 6.4 and 5.8 on the Richter scale, and Hatay was hit hard in the previous quakes too, the ones that came 2 weeks back, and claimed more than 46,000 lives. 46,000. Now, the same region has been struck again. 6 people have died, more than 300 are injured. Rescue operations are underway. Reports say 32 aftershocks were felt in Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon. Aftershocks are small quakes that follow a big one. For the residents of Hatay, like the rest of Turkey, this is a nightmare on repeat mode.
I thought it was the apocalypse. We tried to get out, but we couldn't. We felt that the house was crumbling down. Children were there too. I said, run to the corners, hide. But we could not escape. We collapsed in front of the door. I lost my husband and 2 sons. My daughter was not at home at that time. She was in the hospital. There was no bad news from her, but no good news either.
It felt like the ground would tear apart. The ground was shaking. We were very scared. We thought the ground would tear apart.
The earthquakes have shaken the regime of Turkey's president too. Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his government's corruption are in focus. We've spoken about this before, about how Ankara cut corners, about how shoddy construction was allowed, and how the government response to the tragedy has been inadequate. What's worse, the warning signs were always there. The mayor of Hatay, who is from the opposition party, was asked a question some time back. Is the region prepared to deal with the aftermath of an earthquake? That's the question he was asked. And this is his response. No, we aren't. I can't tell how many times we've written to ministries about this, with mostly no response. Now, with every such report, the crisis for Erdogan deepens. Remember, this is an election year. Turkey will go to polls in less than 90 days from now. May 14th is the date. And this is turning into Erdogan's toughest election ever. The earthquakes may shift the tectonic plates of politics too. The president's approval ratings are hovering around the 30 to 40% mark. His party, the AKP, is up against a coalition of 6 parties. This is called the Nation Alliance, Opinion polls predict a tough election. Both sides are expected to get a 40% vote. The economy was already struggling. The quakes have dealt a body blow. The opposition is sharpening its knives. But will the election be held on time? Reports say Erdogan is keen to postpone it, but the constitution does not allow it unless the nation is at war. So Erdogan must pull a rabbit out of the hat. He's hoping a foreign policy win might help. In the middle of the quake crisis, he's pushing for F-16 jets from the US. Remember, Turkey is a member of the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a military alliance. Some time back, Turkey bought a Russian missile defense system, the S-400. So the Americans sanctioned it. Now Erdogan wants those sanctions to be lifted. He wants to seal a $20 billion deal with the US. It's a deal to buy 40 F-16 jets from America.
With regard to the F-16s, the Biden administration strongly supports the package to both upgrade the existing F-16s and to provide new ones to Turkiye because as a NATO ally and partner, it is in our national interest and the security interest of the alliance that Turkey continue to be able to operate at the higher standards of NATO to make sure that we have full interoperability.
Erdogan wants the jets to modernize his air force. What does America want in return? Erdogan's support to expand the NATO. Sweden and Finland are keen to join. Turkey is the only roadblock. Erdogan says these countries support extremist groups that have been designated as terrorists in Turkey. So there's a deadlock. The US hopes that fighter jets can fix it. Turkey's support is essential because the NATO has 30 members and all of them must vote for new countries to be able to join. So Ankara and Washington may be burying the hatchet for mutual gain. What about Ankara and Islamabad? Best friends until recently, but not anymore it seems. First, Turkey snubbed Pakistan's prime minister and told him to postpone his visit to the country, and now they've exposed Pakistan's aid stunt. Pakistan sent aid after the earthquakes. Turns out it was repackaged Turkish aid. We told you about it yesterday. You may remember that last year Pakistan was struck by floods. Turkey sent aid then. Now Pakistan has repackaged it and sent it back They changed the packaging of the outer boxes, but forgot to change the boxes inside, so they were exposed. Now, reports say the Turkish Consulate General has raised objections. It wants answers from the Pakistani Foreign Ministry. So far, no response. That's classic Pakistan for you. We can only hope it's another lesson learned for Turkiye on who they can call friends. Coming back to the war in Ukraine, it has divided the world into two camps: Ukraine, America and their Western partners, Russia, Belarus and China. Well, now they have a new player, South Africa, an unlikely new entrant in this very tense equation. Is South Africa joining the war? That's what we'll discuss next. Also, how did South Africa wade into this and why? The story begins with a military drill. It's on as we speak. South Africa is hosting the navies of Russia and China. And this is not a sudden development. Throughout this war, South Africa has been quietly building up its influence. We'll explain all of this. First to the drills. They're called Mosai, which means smoke in the Savannah language. That's one of the official languages of South Africa. The drills are happening in the Indian Ocean off the coast of South Africa. They began last week. They will continue till this weekend. The exercise has caused quite a stir. The West is unhappy with South Africa. The US has criticized the naval drills. They see it as an endorsement of Russia's Ukraine war. The fact is, they see any engagement with Russia as an endorsement of the war. Wonder how they see their own engagements with Pakistan and an endorsement of Pakistan's terror activities, perhaps. Don't wait for an answer. Meanwhile, South Africa has rejected the criticism. It says it conducts drills with various countries. The West wants everyone to follow its diktats. But the world doesn't work that way. Foreign policy decisions are determined by national interest. And South Africa is making its priorities clear. National security is at the heart of these drills, it says. South Africa's Navy faces key challenges. It needs to protect its home waters. It needs to combat piracy and protect fisheries, which means teaming up with other stakeholders in the region. Just like India, South Africa has a long history of cooperation with Russia. Their friendship dates back to the days of the apartheid. Erstwhile Soviet Union supported the anti-apartheid struggle. The support was wide-ranging. The Soviet Union gave military training and arms to the ANC, the African National Congress. It is also the current ruling party of South Africa. In recent months, Pretoria has rekindled an old friendship. A few days back, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in South Africa. And this is what the South African Foreign Minister said then.
We believe we should have the right to decide who we relate to and on what basis. This is our foreign policy position, and we will hold on to it.
This is our foreign policy, she said, and we will hold on to it. She couldn't have been clearer. Just like India, South Africa is reaffirming its strategic autonomy. What about Russia? For Moscow, Pretoria is becoming an important partner. The drills are an opportunity for them. They show that Russia still has friends overseas and that the Russian state can still project power beyond its borders. What about China? It is the other partner in this equation. China's presence is a matter of concern. Beijing wants to grow its influence in the Indian Ocean. It wants to establish its naval power. This has traditionally been India's turf, the Indian Ocean. The PLA is challenging India here. They already have a base in Djibouti, and with South Africa, they hope to expand their clout in the region. South Africa has no option but to play along. Its economy is in distress. There are reports of rolling blackouts. Taps are running dry. So South Africa wants to keep China in good humor for Chinese money, among other things. As long as it remains wary of China's debt trap, it should be fine, because that too would be an expression of South Africa's strategic autonomy. And Chinese debt is a huge issue in Africa. First, look at the magnitude of the problem. Africa owes over $700 billion to external lenders. Countries are defaulting on their debt. The stability of the continent is at risk. Efforts are underway to avoid large-scale defaults. But geopolitics is coming in the way. Africa has become a battleground for a great power contest yet again. A contest between the US and China this time. Let's tell you how this is playing out. In 2020, Zambia was among the first to default. How much do they owe? Around $17 billion. That's according to one estimate, $17 billion. China is Zambia's single biggest creditor. Around $6 billion is owed to Chinese financiers. In January, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen visited the country. What for? To help Zambia recover by restructuring its debt. Yellen said that China is a stumbling block in the process.
I am encouraged that progress may become possible shortly. Let me say, I know that the Chinese have been a barrier to concluding the negotiations. I recently met with my Chinese counterpart just a few days ago in Zurich, and I specifically raised the issue of Zambia and asked for their cooperation in trying to reach a speedy resolution.
China has been a barrier, she said. The numbers speak for themselves, but China saw this statement as an insult and it decided to hit back. The Chinese embassy in Zambia issued a rebuttal. Listen to what they said. The best prospect of the debt issues outside the US would be the US Treasury Department solving the US's own domestic debt problem. The statement mentions America's growing national debt. The US Treasury has begun taking quote-unquote extraordinary measures to meet its obligations after the US government hit its $31.4 trillion borrowing limit. Cope with your own debt. That's the message from China to the US. And this is what you call a below-the-belt attack, but it doesn't solve the problem at hand. Who will rescue Africa from this debt crisis? I have some more data, and this is from the United Nations. 54 lower-income countries across the world face a high risk of debt distress. 54. And out of these, 24 countries are from Africa. This includes Nigeria and Egypt, two of the biggest economies in the African continent. Why are African nations struggling with their finances? Broadly, they face two problems. Number one, low tax revenues, and number two, high interest rates on loans. The rates are quite high. Even the United Nations Secretary General cannot ignore this problem anymore. Antonio Guterres says African nations are facing extortion.
Investing in Africa pathways to prosperity requires finance, and developing countries are repeatedly left in the lurch. The global financial system routinely denies them debt relief and concessional financing while charging extortionate interest rates. As a result, vital systems are starved of investment, from health and education to green technology, social protection, and the creation of new sustainable jobs.
The United Nations has extended crisis funding to Africa. But what about China? What is Beijing doing beyond attacking the West? It is very much a part of this problem. China accounts for at least 12% of Africa's debt. This is both private and public debt. And how much money is 12%? More than $150 billion, according to one estimate. In August last year, China cancelled 23 loans, and these were given to 17 countries. Beijing did not reveal the amount. How big were these loans? And it has been doing this since the year 2000. It forgives some loans, and this move generates headlines. China gets good PR out of it, but in reality, this debt relief is meaningless because these loans are anyway nearing their end. And this is the truth of China's development loans. They are essentially debt traps. And China's debt relief is the height of hypocrisy, we say. Our next story is about digital India. It is now the global benchmark for most countries. India's fintech innovation has grown by leaps and bounds. India's Unified Payments Interface, or UPI, has 260 million unique users. It is India's largest digital payment network and the world's fifth largest by volume. Now, UPI is going global. India and Singapore have launched a new initiative, cross-border connectivity of real-time digital payment systems. In simpler words, this means easy linkage between India's UPI and Singapore's Pay Now. That is their version of UPI. Prime Minister Modi hailed this as a new milestone for India-Singapore relations.
UPI Pay Now लिंक का लॉन्च आज दोनों देशों के नागरिकों के लिए एक ऐसा उपहार है जिसका वे उत्सुकता से इंतजार कर रहे थे। सामान्य तौर पर इसका दायरा एक देश की सीमाओं के भीतर ही सीमित होता है, लेकिन आज के लॉन्च ने क्रॉस बॉर्डर फिनटेक कनेक्टिविटी उसके एक नए अध्याय का शुभारंभ किया है.
To understand this better, let's start with the basics. What is UPI? UPI is a quick payment method. It enables instant transfer of funds through a mobile phone. It saves you time. And the risk of sharing bank account details is also eliminated. You don't have to share those details. In India, this transfer can be done 24/7, any time of the day, through multiple platforms, Google Pay, Paytm, and many others. And what is Pay Now? Pay Now is Singapore's counterpart to UPI. It is similar to India's fast payment system. And now, UPI and Pay Now are both linked. How does it work? Fund transfers can be made from India to Singapore and from Singapore to India using mobile phone numbers. You can use your UPI account to transfer money to Singapore. Why is this important? Because it allows people in both the countries to transfer money easily and quickly. And this will benefit students, professionals, NRIs, and their families, among others. It will also save them money, which makes it useful for migrant workers and students studying in both countries. It will reduce the cost of sending remittances by as much as 10%. You see, cross-border retail payments are different from domestic transactions. They're usually less transparent and more expensive.
The Pay Now UPI linkage will offer cheaper, faster, and safer cross-border retail payments and remittances for businesses and individuals alike, directly between bank accounts or e-wallets. It's convenience at your fingertips.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi says benefits of UPI should not be limited to India. Singapore has become India's first cross-border real-time payment partner. But why Singapore of all countries? It's a great way for India to enter the Southeast Asian market. There are about 6.5 lakh Indians currently residing in Singapore. In 2021, Singapore was one of the top 4 inward remittances market for India. What is that? It's one of the top 4 destinations from where remittances or money came to India. Singapore is one of the top 4. In 2018, India and Singapore allowed card and QR code payments between each other. And now they've taken the next step. It says a lot about India's fintech and the success of the Digital India program. India's digital economy is building a strong foundation. There is deep penetration of telecom and internet. And the UPI has become the most preferred payment mechanism. Let me share some numbers with you. Last year, 74 billion transactions in India were done through UPI. And that's a jump of over 90% compared to the previous year. And how much were these transactions worth? Over 126 trillion rupees. That is $1.5 trillion UPI transactions. It's a jump from $72 trillion in 2021. Now, to give you more context, about 2,300 UPI transactions per second were made last year. 2,300 transactions every second. And that's not all. Last month, international phone numbers became UPI enabled. The government is basically incentivizing digital payments, and private players are doing their bit. Earlier this month, PhonePe launched support for UPI international payments. It allows Indian users traveling abroad to pay foreign merchants using UPI. Experts say UPI will continue to see steady growth this year. About $35 billion have been invested across segments. Indian fintech is expected to reach $2.1 trillion by 2030. And that's quite a story. Startups play a big role here. India is the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world after the US and China. India has the 3rd highest number of startups. And about 47% of these startups are in the fintech industry, financial technology. Basically, India is moving its financial transactions to digital platforms. And this is seeing an international expansion. India already stands 2nd in the world after China in terms of fintech adoption. What is fintech adoption? When you use digital methods to make a financial transaction. India's rate is 87%. India is emerging as a leader in digital payment technology, effectively using digitization to fix structural problems. And now let's look at another crisis affecting the world, the rise in sea levels, specifically how there's a Doomsday Glacier in Antarctica that's a ticking time bomb. The Thwaites Glacier is roughly the size of the UK. It is melting at a rapid pace. Scientists now have a better idea why. The Doomsday Glacier is already responsible for 4% of the global rise in sea levels. 4%. If it completely collapses, sea levels could rise by almost a meter. And of course, some cities like London, New York and Mumbai will be affected more than others. Our next report examines the latest findings.
This is the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. Its width is around 120 kilometers, making it the world's widest glacier. But it's more famous for its nickname, the Doomsday Glacier. It's called that because it's melting, and melting fast. If it collapses, it could wreak havoc around the world. First, a primer on glaciers. They're slow-moving rivers of ice. They're mostly located in mountain ranges and cold places like Antarctica, Iceland and Greenland. Glaciers are said to move slowly because though the ice melts, fresh snow falls on glaciers and freezes. When not enough snow replaces what's lost, the glacier is said to be retreating. The Thwaites Glacier is located in western Antarctica. It's about the size of the UK. It's a retreating glacier, parts of which keep breaking and falling into the Antarctic Ocean. It alone has contributed to 4% of the global rise in sea levels. And scientists are concerned about the speed at which it's collapsing. The glacier is cracking, and scientists want to know why. They want to make models to predict how fast it will collapse. So, a research team drilled a hole in the glacier and sent a robot to see what's happening beneath the ice. They say there's both good news and bad news.
When we went to Thwaites and observed underneath the ice shelf, we found this immensely warm water. It was about 1.5 degrees above freezing. And that should drive a relatively high melt rate. But what we also observed was this layer of fresh water right at the ice base that creates a very strong density gradient, and that density gradient stops the heat from getting from the ocean into the ice.
What this means is that the glacier is partially insulated from warm water. It's not melting as fast as previously thought. Sounds like good news, right? Sadly, that isn't the case. While the whole glacier isn't melting too fast, it's still breaking off. Here's why.
The final point where the glacier rests on bedrock, called the grounding line, is retreating as warmer ocean water melts underneath the ice shelf. It's moved 14 kilometers since 1992. Ice that was on land has melted or is now floating on water, and so raising sea levels.
Simply put, as the ice retreats, it stops resting on land and starts floating on water. This displaces the water and causes sea levels to rise. It also puts a strain on the glacier, which then cracks and eventually breaks off, again leading to a rise in sea levels. If it collapses completely, sea levels may rise by an additional meter. Even though this is happening in Antarctica, it affects everyone. All the oceans are connected. If sea levels rise, all of our coasts and coastal cities are at risk. Sea levels are already rising. Water levels were going up by 4.5 millimeters every year between 2013 and 2022. That's about 3 times the annual rise in the last century. As this continues, coastal cities will drown. Even if they manage to keep the sea out using walls, every time there's a storm, the sea will surge in. London, New York, Mumbai, Shanghai, Bangkok, Cairo, all these major cities are at risk. If the Thwaites Glacier falls, all these cities may fall with it. That's why it's called the Doomsday Glacier.
Let's talk about children's books. Which title comes to your mind? Let me make it a bit easier. Which author comes to your mind? Roald Dahl, Enid Blyton, Rudyard Kipling, I'm sure. There's Dr. Seuss, a stalwart when it comes to children's books. We'll talk about all of them. But first, Roald Dahl. He's back in the news. He's been dead since 1990, but his writings live on. These writings are now being fidgeted with. There's a whole controversy around changes being made to his works, and that has stoked a censorship debate. Roald Dahl is a big name in the world of children's literature. He's the author of famous books like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Twits, Matilda, Fantastic Mr. Fox. Roald Dahl's books have sold more than 300 million copies, and they've been translated into 63 languages. His reach is global. But his publisher, Puffin Books, is now trying to sanitize his writings. They've hired what they call sensitivity readers to go over Dahl's works, and they've begun their work. Several changes are being made to Dahl's best works. In The Twits, Mrs. Twits was described as ugly and beastly by Dahl. but now she's just beastly. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Augustus Gloop is now described as enormous. He was previously called fat. Dahl's books are now being made gender neutral. The Oompa Loompas were small men. Now they're just small people. Terms like boys and girls have been replaced with children. Words like crazy and mad have been removed altogether. And it's not like the publisher is merely removing or replacing words. Puffin and its sensitivity readers are practically rewriting Roald Dahl's books. In the book The Witches, Dahl wrote a paragraph explaining how witches are bald beneath their wigs. Now that paragraph ends with a new line. This is what it says. There are plenty of other reasons why women might wear wigs, and there is certainly nothing wrong with that. Roald Dahl must be turning in his grave. People aren't impressed with his books being changed. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak certainly isn't. Sunak's official spokesperson said, and I'm quoting, "I think it's important that works of literature and works of fiction are preserved and not airbrushed. We have always defended the right to free speech and expression." Writer Salman Rushdie is appalled too. This is what he said, and I'm quoting again, "Roald Dahl was no angel, but this is absurd censorship. Puffin Books and the Dahl estate should be ashamed." Absurd censorship, he says. But Roald Dahl is not alone in suffering this. He's a controversial figure for sure, but he belongs to a league of writers who are now being accused of racism and insensitivity. Enid Blyton is among them. We've all heard about her or read her works. She has been a favorite of millions. But these days, Blyton's work is being debated. Her writings are being termed as racist and sexist. Some say her stories have xenophobic overtones. Just to give you a sense of how big an author she was. Enid Blyton wrote more than 4,500 short stories and published 700 books for children. Blyton has sold over 600 million copies globally. She still has a worldwide following and appeal. But what's problematic with the writings? Take The Little Black Doll from 1966. Sambo is the doll, the protagonist in the story. Sambo's owner refused to accept the doll since his face was black. The owner changed his mind only when the doll's quote-unquote ugly black face was washed clean by rain. What about Dr. Seuss? His books are today known for their creative imageries alongside short storylines. And how many books has he sold? More than 600 million copies and counting. If I Ran the Zoo, that's the name of a popular book by him. What's controversial about it? Well, the book includes pictures of two African men wearing grass skirts. These men are shown without shoes and shirts. And the most famous book by this author, The Cat in the Hat. In it, the cat is shown wearing a long top hat, an unusually large bow tie, and white gloves. The depiction is eerily similar to how actual blackface performers dressed. They did not belong in the white man's family. They were merely a source of amusement. These imageries caught the public eye around 3 years ago. In 2021, 6 books by Dr. Seuss were banned. Forbes listed him second in the list of highest paid dead celebrities of 2020. That tells you how influential the man still remains. Then we have Rudyard Kipling. His work is now described as racist and imperialist. Kipling is the author of The Jungle Book. He said the colonized world should recognize its inferiority. He believed all of Britain's colonies were inferior to it. Now, we know children have impressionable minds. The fact that many of them still read these authors is what is concerning. Reading material that is even remotely racist can influence a child's mindset. That is correct. Banning these authors, though, is not the solution. Neither is brazenly rewriting their books. They wrote what they thought was right in their times. Debating what they wrote would be a step in the right direction. Giving children the right context will be the next big step, not changing the books altogether. There's an impending threat to the US, and this isn't one of the usual geopolitical ones. It's zoological. It's in the form of what's being called the Canadian super pig. It's a problem that has already left Canada hamstrung. These super pigs are a hybrid between domesticated pigs and wild boars. For decades, they've been running riot in Canada. They've been called incredibly intelligent and highly elusive, and they're inching ever closer to the US border. Here's a report.
Pigs are all over social media, from superstars like Peppa and the Family to cute little teacup pigs that make people gush over them. But most pigs don't stay that tiny. They can grow into fearsome beasts, especially in Canada, the home of the super pig. Canadian super pigs are a hybrid species. In the 1980s, Canadian farmers bred domesticated pigs with wild boars. This was for both more meat and hunting purposes. These hybrids were big, strong and adaptive like boars, and proficient breeders like domesticated pigs. They're the ultimate pig. So why are they a problem? You see, while pigs are native to most of the world, they're foreign to the Americas and Australia. They were brought by humans, mostly Europeans, for food. Once they get out into the wild, they wreck the environment. They're considered one of the world's most dangerous invasive species. Pigs are omnivores with a diet range that almost rivals humans. They'll eat anything: plants, eggs, animals, you name it. This is extremely dangerous to native flora and fauna that's evolved without their presence. Pigs are known to ruin crops, destroy bird nests, and even kill smaller wild animals. They also pollute rivers and carry diseases. Left on their own, pigs can cause big problems for all other species around. Canadians have realized this recently. Their super pigs have been breeding in the wild for decades. Whenever some of them escaped from farms in the past, people thought they wouldn't survive the Canadian winter, where temperatures can go down to minus 50 degrees Celsius. But these super pigs are also super smart. They've been known to burrow up to 2 meters under snow, creating a snow cave, or perhaps a pigloo. They line these caves with plants to create a warm layer. The caves can be so warm that trackers have seen steam emerge from these burrows on a cold winter morning. This means the pigs are bad for the environment, and they're too smart to die out in the wild. And they're headed to the northern US. The US already has a feral pig problem. These are domesticated pigs that broke free and now live in the wild. They infest the American South, particularly Texas. The US has been struggling to bring their population under control. Of course, Texas being Texas, it's been trying to fix the issue in its trademark way, using machine guns and choppers.
Absolutely. So we're hunting primarily for feral pigs. Coyotes are on the roster as well. However, they're not as much of a problem for the state of Texas as the feral pig population is. So right now you're looking at about 1.5 million feral pigs in the state of Texas and growing every year. Their gestation rate is fairly out of control. So they're basically clustered east, central, and southern Texas primarily. So we're kind of in the epicenter of the pig problem.
If Canada's super pigs cross the border, there may be a new epicenter up north. While bacon lovers may rejoice, everyone else should worry. This horde of hogs can wreak havoc.
And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with China, where a Tesla car went out of control and crashed into 2 vehicles. Unfortunately, 1 person died and the driver was badly injured. Elon Musk apparently has a solution for every problem. We're waiting for one for Tesla cars. In Australia, meanwhile, a dramatic video of a rescue operation. 2 brothers were saved in time after their boat capsized off the coast of Fraser Island. In Turkiye, meanwhile, a dash cam captured the moment a fresh earthquake hit the city of Hatay. In Brussels, thousands of protesters took to the streets. They called upon the European Union to add Iran's Revolutionary Guards to its list of terror organizations. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
Autonomy!